What if we could use quantum to fight quantum hacking? And in fact, this is possible, again, by understanding and embracing quantum uncertainty. For example, if we took quantum bits, qubits, and encoded our secret information in those qubits, or maybe use it to build a key that we then use to encode our information, then if there is a hacker out there who wants to copy the information secretly and then decrypt it, they wouldn't be able to copy the key because uncertainty and superposition. There is no way that the hacker can precisely copy perfectly every part of your quantum bit. And that is a kind of encryption that is not based on mathematical problems like factoring. So no matter how complicated the problem is, it doesn't matter. No matter how smart that whiz kid is, it doesn't matter. No matter how much computing power you have, it doesn't matter. Why? Because this encryption relies on the laws of quantum physics, the laws of the universe. So hackers would have to violate the laws of physics to be able to crack your code. So that's a very powerful kind of encryption process. And there's much more to this, the potential of quantum computing in this bigger framework. I want to describe a bit about this. It all sounds like science fiction, I know. But in fact, just recently, China launched a satellite, a quantum satellite, which is capable of generating pairs of entangled photons, which are particles of light, and sending them to stations on Earth separated by about 1,000 kilometers. And these entangled particles can be tested to see if they're really entangled, and then they can be used to develop exactly the kind of quantum encrypted keys that I just described. And this could become the basis of a future quantum internet as more of these satellites and a quantum infrastructure can be laid out. And that could actually lead to even more science fiction applications, such as quantum teleportation. Not of humans, but I'm not making this up. It is actually possible to teleport, not humans, but quantum information from one location to another. And it's already been demonstrated in the lab. Now, a lot of this kind of applications and testing is happening in research groups around the world, and it's still at the prototype level. However, even though we don't have large-scale quantum computers, these small-scale prototypes already offer quantum advantages. So in my own research team, we also actually do this kind of testing and benchmarking by accessing quantum computers on the cloud. For example, we did a small test where we simulated a task involving 3 parties that have to make a joint decision about something. And they are connected, but during the decision making, they cannot actually communicate. So if they try to just make the best guess without any communication and using just regular computers, then they have a success rate of about 75%, which is shown as a blue curve here. But if they are allowed to use entanglement, which is what we simulated using the quantum computer, then their theoretically predicted success rate would actually be 100%. But when we actually ran this on a real quantum computer, the data you see is the purple curve, which is not quite at the theoretical white 100% level, but it is higher than the blue curve. And this is the reason it's not quite at 100% is because there's errors in these small-scale quantum computers, because these are very fragile devices. They operate at temperatures that are colder than outer space. So even the slightest bit of heat is like noise. And that's what you're seeing here. But in spite of that, you clearly see that there's an advantage in this very small-scale, simple test that we can do. Even my students can run this on the quantum computer. And that's very exciting, because the next steps would be to improve on this and expand and eventually perhaps develop really large-scale quantum computers. And if we can do that, then there's a potential to impact many, many areas. So I've already described for you a little bit about the possibility of building a quantum internet, the communication application. On the computing side, it's equally exciting, because certain kinds of problems, such as if you want to calculate all of the properties of, let's say, a molecule consisting of individual atoms and all of the electrons, these are quantum particles. Therefore, using a quantum computer to actually simulate and calculate that would be much more efficient than what we do now with our regular computers. And that could lead to better drug development, maybe smart materials, better solar cells, and who knows, we don't even know all the possible applications that are out there. The other thing that I want to mention is that entanglement offers a way to do high precision sensing that can beat the current limits of our sensors, and that too has many applications in many fields, as I'm sure you will agree. Design is also really important because, as I said, these materials, as we develop them and improve them, we can cut down on the cost and the energy requirements for these kinds of applications. But for me personally, the thing that really excites me is just the science itself. Because as we use these computers more and more, we're going to understand their advantages and their limitations. And that's telling us, what does it mean to talk about a quantum versus a regular world that we live in? So we're learning about the fundamental laws of nature and what we mean by saying, what is quantum about quantum? So to me, that's the most exciting piece. And many research teams, just like my own, are working on the problem, and this is growing, in fact, exponentially around the world. Governments as well as private sector investors are very interested in this industry. In fact, the last year, there was more investment in quantum than all of the previous years combined. And that's exciting because, as you see, the potential is huge if we ever build these quantum computers. They're going to impact society in multiple ways, from healthcare to energy use to climate change to who knows what else. And that means all of society may change. There may be a real revolution that started as an idea, now leading to all of this technology, and then who knows what in the future for our society. And when we talk about society, that brings up questions of who is developing this technology and who will benefit from it and what will we use it for. So I want to finish by showing you a favorite photo of mine. Here it is. I don't know if you can guess who these women are, but I will tell you, all the women in this photo are physicists. Isn't that amazing? So I love this. Yeah. This photo was actually taken at a conference gathering together women physicists from over 50 countries. And in fact, there's talent and curiosity and energy all around the world. Imagine if we could harness all of that and really have everybody contribute and benefit from this coming quantum revolution. That's the revolution that I want to be a part of. Thank you.
Please welcome the founder, chairman, and chief technology officer at Orbital Insight, Dr. James Crawford.
So good afternoon, everyone. First, I'd like to thank the folks at Amazon for inviting me to speak, and thank all of you for taking some time out of your day to listen. So we live in a changing world. Who of us would have thought 3 years ago that we would have been facing a global pandemic where we all had to stay in our homes for a year, couldn't leave, or that we would be in the middle of the largest conflict in Europe since World War II, or that the US and the rest of the world would be staring down a possible recession. And then on top of that, we have the reality of climate change, which introduces a whole nother level of uncertainty. The strange thing about it is that these changes appear to be both increasingly rapid and increasingly chaotic, hard to predict. And indeed, if you listen to the folks on the Sunday TV shows, the talking heads on TV, and they'll talk to you with great certainty about what's going to happen in the next week and the next month, and then you listen to them a week later and they'll tell you something completely different. Now, at the same time, we also live in a world of, it's more censored than ever before. It's better instrumented than ever before. The number of satellites we have orbiting the Earth, we now have hundreds of satellites orbiting the Earth, looking at the Earth in multiple spectral bands, drones in the sky. We have AIS on every plane, AIS on every ship, ADS-B on every plane. We have anonymized cell phone data from billions of cell phones, billions of pings. A cell phone was here at this time, a car was here at this time. But what is that data telling us? Why, with all of that data, don't we know that we're going into recession? Why don't we know where deforestation is occurring and how it's occurring and how to stop it? You know, if you think about the days of science fiction, if the Starship Enterprise goes into orbit around a planet, Kirk turns to Spock and says, "Tell me about the planet." And Spock will immediately look in his little device and he will say, "Well, there's 2 continents, there's about 5 billion entities living there, and based on the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, they seem to be in the late industrial pre-fusion age." How does he do that? How does that little device do that when the Enterprise has been in orbit around that planet for about 5 minutes? More importantly, how could we do that? Because that is what we need to understand our world and to understand it in real time so that we can manage our world properly and manage our resources, manage our economy, manage social and environmental change and challenges. The reality is that the answers to the questions we need answers to are hidden behind the pixels. So we have all of these images coming down, essentially the whole Earth every day. But if you wanted to look at the whole Earth every day, you would need 8 million people doing nothing all day, every day, but staring at satellite images. The world is just really, really big. And indeed, if you wanted to, let's say you really wanted to understand corn yield, and you wanted to be able to predict how much corn the US was going to grow this year, and you said, "I'm going to spend the rest of the summer driving the fields of Illinois and Indiana and Iowa and looking at the cornfield, so I'm going to know how much corn the US is going to produce," you would see in that period of time about 0.1% of all the cornfields in the US. Similarly, if you said, "I want to know if we're going into a recession," and you started visiting all the factories, all the mills, all the mines, all the shopping centers, you would see 0.1 or less % of all of those, even in the US, and have no idea whether or not we're going into a recession. The problems are simply too big for the human eye. They're too big for the human brain and too big for the human eye. So what we are about at Orbital Insight is augmenting that human insight, augmenting that human intelligence with the AI needed and the cloud computing needed to actually work at a global scale. To be able to take in aerial imagery, satellite imagery, drone imagery, as well as the Internet of Things data, the ship tracking data, the plane tracking data, the anonymized cell phone pings, the connected car data, and apply that data to understanding real problems, to understanding problems in supply chain management, to understanding problems in what's going to be in your grocery store, and what's going on in the ports, and what's going on with deforestation. And this gives you the visibility into things that you can't see. It lets you look not just at the pixels, but be able to see a forest, to be able to see all the forests, to be able to see the lakes and understanding the lake levels, to be able to comprehend that by augmenting your intelligence and our analysts' intelligence with AI, to be able to understand that at a national and at a global scale. So the kinds of problems we're then interested in are things like supply chain traceability. So understanding if you buy a granola bar, obviously if you had a choice and you were sitting in the shopping at a grocery store and there were 2 granola bars in front of you, you would buy the one that didn't cause deforestation in Indonesia, right? Pretty much anybody would, but how do you know? Even if you are the maker of that granola bar, how do you know that you're not causing deforestation in Indonesia? If you trace down that supply chain for palm oil, it eventually traces down tree-like out to about 1 million different smallholder farms across Indonesia and other parts of the world. Any or all of those might be causing deforestation. Most are not. Right? Most of those farmers are well-intentioned, they follow good practices, they work within regions where the palm oil plants have been established for years and are managed responsibly. Some are not. How do you know, though, when the supply chain is that big? We have the ability now, using IoT, using geospatial analysis, to trace back the supply chain all the way to that level, aggregate it up and say, okay, we are going to certify these granola bars, we're going to certify these products as being environmentally responsible. Similarly, as you've noticed, we're having a lot of shortages. First it was toilet paper, and then later it was baby food. At some point it was chicken. So because of COVID, because of the war in the Ukraine, because of general chaos in our world, supply chains are not always dependable. And the challenge isn't, if you're, let's say you're running that Ford F-150 plant, the challenge isn't your tier 1 suppliers. The challenge is the magnesium part that's needed to hook the alternator onto the engine block you can't get that because the magnesium plant burned down because they had a fire because magnesium is highly flammable. So it's your tier 3, tier 4 suppliers that have a problem, and then suddenly you have to shut down your Ford F-150 plant. But since we now have the ability, or we're building the ability with geospatial analysis and these huge volumes of data to track thousands and tens of thousands of factories and farms and mills and mines, we can